Let's move to this issue. Last night, the President releasing the findings of the inquiry into the docking of the Russian cargo vessel, the Lady R, at Simonstown Naval Base in December last year. The independent inquiry confirmed that while a shipment of defence equipment was received, no weapons were loaded onto the ship. President Ramaphosa saying people who claim publicly to have evidence of arms being put on that ship had been approached and had either not presented any evidence or had simply not responded. He also said for security reasons, the full details in the report are not being released publicly, but a summary is due to be released today. Well, we're still waiting for that. Let's speak now to the DA MP and spokesperson for the party on defence, Cobus Marais. Mr. Marais, thank you so much for your time. Does this clear the matter up for you? Do you believe that these three people investigating, they are credible people, well regarded? Do you believe that the President, that the report and what the President has had to say are plausible and believable?
Good evening, Sally. Good evening to your viewers. One must first start by saying that I will not criticize the panel or the judge, because they can only do in terms of what they are instructed to do and in terms of their terms of reference. So we have tried to determine what the objectives was, and the instructions was to the panel. They were not prepared to share that with us. So at this stage, and in terms of what has been released, we haven't got a very high expectation that they have delved into the matter to unravel and disclose all the information that pertaining to the case. It seems like they have to a large extent look at see whether weapons were loaded onto the vessel. And we were very clear, and I was very clear right from December last year, that the crane was still working under spotlights and stuff was loaded onto the vessel. And we want to know what was loaded onto the vessel. We have got very good intel and telling us what was loaded, but we believe that the panel should have looked at that, but it seems like it was not part of their instructions.
And as you say, we haven't even yet got the executive summary, which is due to come out today. So you accept that arms were not loaded onto that ship, but you want to know what was loaded?
Exactly. We know what was offloaded.
What exactly was offloaded? You're saying it's not actually classified. So what was taken off the ship?
What we know, it was old orders. The only old orders that was that was known to us was in 2019 and in 2020. 2 import permits was issued by the eNCA for the importation of ammunition, not equipment, and it was classified as rounds and shells, and at the cost of R2.21 per unit. Now, that clearly indicates to us that it is probable or probably AK-47 rounds or similar shells that was ordered. We know from experience, and it's not a secret, that some of our special forces do prefer to use East Bloc ammunition, and specifically the AK-47. So they need ammunition for the AK-47s, and they do train with that as well. So that in itself is no problem, although in terms of the eNCA Act, any export or import permit is only valid for 45 days. You can extend it once, and after that you have to reapply for those permits. Now, nothing was reported to us, and we have got a concern whether those permits were still valid. And obviously what was, and we know that 7 containers with that quantity that correlates 100% with those 2 permits was eventually delivered in Khopong to the ammunition depot. So we have got a very clear idea of that, and that's not classified. It was reported to us in an open meeting. It was not a closed meeting. So I don't know why the President's claim that is of such a high classified nature. And then we have got a very good idea what was loaded on the vessel on that Friday morning.
What do you think?
Well, it is not weapons, and it is not apples and pears.
Would it be a problem, whatever it is, as long as it's not weapons?
Oh, sure, it will be, because in terms of my information, there should have been permits issued for that. And remember, what both the minister said and Philip Dexter, the chairperson of Arms Corps, is that it might have been clandestine parties who loaded something onto the vessel. Now, we want to know if that is the case. We have requested the cargo manifest, which would have told us what exactly was loaded and offloaded. Obviously, they refused to give that to us.
So still no cargo manifest. The other question that wasn't answered last night is why the Lady R turned off the transponders before arriving. Is that absolutely confirmed fact that ship did turn off their transponders?
Yes.
So we still don't know
yes.
why.
Yes, and that is a very good question, because commercial vessels are supposed to always to have their AIS on. And we know that even when the two Navy vessels that escorted the Lady R into Simonstown and False Bay, at the time, the two Navy vessels' AIS was switched on, while the AIS of the Lady R was switched off, so that it is not traceable for people on the ordinary marine tracker software. And that is a good question. Remember, the other thing that is also unusual is, and that the President has also not addressed, normally and always, ammunition exports and imports, armament imports and exports, or any military equipment never takes place via Simonstown. It is always done via Portnet, customs ports of entry and exit. Yeah. And for some reason, the Lady R never intended or even planned to dock in Cape Town, in Table Bay Harbour.
Yeah.
And
sorry to jump in.
It must have been with high-level authorization to Simonstown.
It's interesting, because the President did also say we had no control how and where that shipment was come. You say
no. That's if you look at the NCAC Act, it prescribed that import permits must and import documentation must reveal all the information, the port that the ship will dock, that all the permits and all the documentation is in order. And remember, and the Americans forewarned South Africa that the Lady R was on her way to South Africa. So it was known to us. Even at that stage, the destination of the Lady R was not Cape Town or Simonstown, it was Dar es Salaam, and she never went to Dar es Salaam.
Interesting. I have to ask you a question about something that your party leader, John Steenhuisen, told CNN in May, that the DA had apparently suspected for a year that South Africa was supplying arms to Russia. Now, that must be based on evidence or information. If so, was that information handed over to this inquiry? And what was this based on? What evidence was this allegation based on?
Remember, all our intel, and it is not already manufactured ammunition, it is components of that is used to manufacture weapons and ammunition. So, I mean, my information is what was loaded with components that obviously will be eventually used in ammunition and weapons that could have been used in the Ukraine. There is some trends that we have seen that it seems like shortly after the Lady R arrived back in Russia, that low-level detonating missiles were used above the trenches in Ukraine, and shortly after that it stopped. So whether that correlates with what we suspect have been loaded onto the Lady R, I think that is up for discussion.
I have to jump in because I'm so sorry. I just need as a point of clarity. So what you're saying is that John Steenhuisen is not wrong, because what you're saying is that while you accept that weapons were not loaded onto the Lady R, you believe components were, which then could have been assembled to use for weapons. Is that what you're telling us?
Correct.
Did you pass that information on and that intel on to the inquiry?
No, because they didn't ask for that. When they approached me, the panel at proverbial number 99, I specifically asked them, okay, what information do you want from me? What is your objectives? What is your terms of reference? so that I can, release the information that I have got. I've also asked them whether I will be able to scrutinize only that portion of the draft report that will deal with my evidence and information.
Yeah.
And on both, they came back and say, no, they will not grant me any of those rights or information. And then, that was already on the 18th.
Yeah.
So my legal advice was then rather not to take part.
I understand that they did ask you to take part, but couldn't you have just handed the information over, the intel that you have over? Why not?
No, because clearly they were not interested in that. They were only interested in the docking of the Lady R, and I've asked them specifically, the objectives of that. And, the information is of such a nature that you cannot just pass it on so that it can be wiped under the proverbial carpet. That we will never do. And, some information and sources are too valuable to do that. You never do that.
Oh, I see. So you were protecting sources. Are you convinced of credible sources, your credible sources?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So far, all my sources, all my information, and I mean 100% of that, was corroborated, was confirmed, and even I can publicly say I've never consulted with the Americans. So when the American ambassador came out and released his information, it was like a final confirmation to me that, yes, I always knew that was true. And remember, I still claim that they've got the intel capabilities and satellite capabilities to anyway track the Lady R, and they have done that. So why would they not know what was loaded onto the Lady R? That's still my belief.
Well, apparently they didn't offer evidence either. And I'm battling to understand why you wouldn't find some way to get this to this panel that you say is credible. Why didn't you make more of an effort or do something? Because now we're sitting with a situation where you're saying, I have rock-solid evidence that components were actually loaded on, that could have been assembled, and you're basically saying that this is a whitewash.
It is, and that's why we were very concerned right from the beginning. My colleague Powell also submitted a prior application to get the terms of reference of the panel, and it should be public knowledge what they are instructed to do. They refused to release that. I submitted a prior application to get the car manifest, which will confirm what was offloaded, if that is the case, if that was all that was offloaded, and if it was food or whatever that was loaded onto the Lady R, that would have confirmed that. They also refused to give that information. So clearly, all the information that we have received, all that we were prepared to offer them, they were clearly not interested in that. And it seems like, remember, the president has already said when he appointed the panel that he will not release the report, and subsequently they said, his office said that he might release portions or parts of the report. Now, what is the criteria and the qualifications for releasing parts of that, and which parts? We remember he can still submit that to Parliament, but so far has refused. And we're part of the public that is prevented from seeing the report, even in a redacted form or in a classified meeting or in a closed session meeting. So one can only ask, why is he doing that? And it seems like right from the beginning, they've been very blunt and they've been very quiet. They were not open and honest and transparent with South Africa on this regard. So yes, that's where we stand.
Ms. Maria, I then have to ask you, you say you have evidence, you say you have impeccable sources, but you need to protect them. What do you do with this information now? Because this is important information. What now for you?
Well, remember, we still reserve our rights in this regard, and depending on what will be in the summary, the executive summary of the report, we will study that, and then we will follow certain routes via Parliament to see whether we can get access to the report, or at least part of the report, even in a redacted form, and then subsequently we will decide, what we need to do further. But clearly, it seems like it's another pala situation, and it is very discouraging, and there are so many fantastic people in the Defence Force and in South Africa. And then there are obviously certain people who do not have the political will to play open cards with public, because there's no reason why this report cannot be released. No reason.
All right, thank you very much for chatting to us this evening. That's DA MP and spokesperson for the DA on Defence, Kobus Maree. He's making a very strong allegation. He says while he accepts that arms and weapons were not loaded on to Lady Russia, he says he has credible evidence and information that components were loaded, and those components would have been able to be assembled into some form of weaponry once they arrived in Russia. He's called the Lady R inquiry a whitewash. And when I asked him why he didn't give this evidence to the inquiry, he said it's clear that they weren't going to handle it properly. I think I'm correct in summarising what he said. He wanted to be involved so that he could protect his sources, and they refused on that aspect of his involvement. So this is going to, of course, prompt further reaction, I'm sure, but that is what the DA spokesperson on Defence is telling us this evening. Now, still